My name is Michael Hardenfeld. I like to write blogs about Poland in Danish, and I also make some video blogs in Danish. And I'm here with Professor Urbanik from Roman Law, head of Roman Law at the University of Warsaw. And the reason I would like to meet with Urbanik is that we've just had an election in Poland, and we've had 8 years with a PiS government, and I would like to hear a little bit about your views on what will happen next. One thing is, I've heard and read that people claim that the outgoing ministers, and maybe also the president, some officials, have been committing constitutional delicts, maybe crimes. I don't know, I cannot tell about that, but the right thing to deal with that would be with the state tribunal, as far as I understand. And now, do you feel it's realistic to put anyone in?
That's a very good question, I suppose. But before I address this question, I probably would want to say that it's a difficult situation in general. So what you do, what one does with a constitutional disorder. Yes. How do you restore order? How you restore law? How you restore peace? And how you restore how you reconcile people within the country? That's a question which every kind of transformation needs to answer. And hello, cat. Theoretically there are two options available. Either you try to negotiate and we forgive and reincorporate those or some of those that had been doing these things to the constitutional order that had undermined the rule of law, and we use all means possible for that. So the state tribunal, regular ordinary courts, prosecutors and so on, or special investigation committees at the parliament, or you... okay, once again, so either you go with this kind of trying to find the liabilities and trying to get these people who are responsible for undermining the rule of law punished for what they did. State tribunal, ordinary courts, prosecutions, special investigation committees within the parliament. Or the other option would be you try to incorporate them, reincorporate them somehow. You forgive them, you put them, and you try doing it the soft way, so to speak. And I think yesterday or the day before, an eminent scholar on constitutional law, Wojciech Sadurski, wrote a feuilleton in Gazeta Wyborcza. He's a very interesting character. He's a character, and he would define these two standpoints by legalists, so those who would like to get the liabilities as they should, and the pragmatists.
Yes. And that's exactly what it's all about, what I wanted to ask you about, because...
So with this little introduction, now I can...
Because I've been reading a little bit about it as myself, and I can see, for example, Piotrowski from Warsaw, University of Warsaw, is very much in favor of keeping the constitution word by word, not going anywhere above that, whereas my talk about making a referendum to get rid of the president.
I think one should be very careful not to restore the constitutional order undermining the constitutional order by itself.
Yes, because then you have a precedent for doing that.
Then you have a precedent, then you actually do what the others had done, and how better are we with what we are doing than the others did. The problem is that with the the PiS government and their officials overtook the state, creating illegal bodies.
Yes. And
with the perspective of a presidential veto to any kind of statute that could be passed to try to restore the regular situation, one should think, okay, so what can we do? Do we stay? Do we accept what had been done or not? And I think just two more little thoughts before I answer directly your question. One is, as a lawyer, I I tend to be pretty rigid.
Yes.
So I think if law is, and that's actually my Roman law training, if we do not fulfill the ritual, if we do not stick to the features, the conditions, the requirements of a legal act, then it is not a legal act, and it needs to be at least convalidated or validated, if you like, anew. So in case of all the judges wrongfully appointed, I think there is no other way but a new procedure, because they are not judges, and if they stay on the benches and if they go on judging and issuing judgments, this is going to corrupt even more the system of law that we have.
So you would like to get rid of those judges?
I'm not sure if this is perhaps going a little bit too far. I'm not sure if I want to get rid of them or how I would like to get rid of them, but I'm sure they are not a single one of those is a judge, and thus he or she, they need to be at least reappointed so they could carry out their constitutional duties. And it's not my opinion, it's not the opinion of the legal experts. It is what has been very clearly stated by our own courts, the Supreme Court, in its resolution,
European courts,
and on both of the European courts. So it's apart from a rigid legal lawyer's mind, we need to do it. We have actually quite some important practical implications for the reason for which.
But then I'll jump a little bit in my questions, because then I'll go down to the Council of the Judiciary, because we still have those people appointed by PiS, which are they're politicians. But some people claim we can get rid of them by an act of parliament. Some people claim we need a law which will be vetoed by the president. So how will you do that in practice?
I was discussing that, funnily enough, 2 weeks ago with my students. So strangely enough, we were reading Cicero on his house.
Cicero?
Yeah, Cicero on his house. And there's this little moment in I mean, the whole speech, I don't know if everybody remembers, but the speech is about Cicero coming back from his banishment and trying to get back his land or his estate on Palatine Hill. And the way he's going to do it, he wants to show that the law that was passed depriving him of that land was put forward by someone who had no legal power to do that, had no legal authority, because he usurped his status. And he usurped his status through an illegal act.
Yes.
And you would understand immediately that it wasn't even me, it was the students who immediately jumped to the question of an illegal act which stands at the beginning of something, and then what consequence there. There's this Roman legal saying, ex injuria jus non oritur, from unlawfulness law cannot originate. And I would say that since the National Council of Judiciary is not a National Council of Judiciary, it only has got a sampling of it. For me, the easiest, but I have this luxury of not being a practical constitutional lawyer. I can say that for easiest would be just to say, this is not a Council of Judiciary. The old Council of Judiciary, which mandate had been illegally interrupted.
Do you think the President will agree with you?
I mean, there's no need to accept the President's idea on that. 6 years ago, they illegally, unconstitutionally aborted the ongoing mandate of the legal National Council of Judiciary. They still had 2 years to go. Some of these people are still alive. Some of these people can still continue their jobs. But maybe that's too crazy of an idea.
I think it sounds like a great idea, but it will need a lot of controversies.
Yeah, but of course, it like circumvent the problem with what happens. Actually, we have a judgment of the Constitutional Court saying that the composition of the Council of Judiciary is illegal. The way it is made is nowadays unconstitutional. But Constitutional Court never operates positively. It can only remove an unconstitutional statute from its system. So what happened back then when still the old Constitutional Court said that the reform on the Council of Judiciary was unconstitutional? Well, that new law was declared unconstitutional. It is not in the legal system anymore. We should thus go back to the situation from before, not to the old law, because that had been abrogated. That this cannot, the Constitutional Court cannot restore it. But the old council was there. So for 2 years more, they can serve as the councillors. They can.
Okay.
But
it's an interesting idea.
But
but the president will still have to sign for each new judge.
He will have to swear them in. This is the problem. Yes, and we know that even before he did not swear in lawfully selected candidates to the judicial office. I've got a few colleagues from my faculty.
Yes.
There were candidates to the Supreme Court of Justice. They had gone through all the procedure, and the president did not swear them in. And this is one of the unconstitutional moves of the president. Again, it's not something that is a deep legal science. This is a basic truth.
Yes.
An administrative power within a state cannot analogously obtain competences. The president only has the competences which are directly stated in the Constitution. So if the Constitution says the president appoints, it does not mean that he has a power not to appoint.
No, but it will be extremely difficult to get the president for the state tribunal.
No, this is impossible. This is impossible. This will
and
not
that's
happen.
the only court that can do anything.
This cannot happen unless there is a political breakdown. The peace breaks into little pieces, and some of these old peace allies of old members of the peace coalition would like to have some personal gains, and they will vote. But I don't see it's very
no, it's not very likely
realistic. But then of course we come back to the other point. Do we actually shall we have an idea about pardoning the constitutional wrongdoers, or shall we not? And some people come back to the important moment of our history, 1989, when it did happen, the Round Table talks, of which I'm extremely proud. I think it was a great universal success, and they were based on a kind of a deal of pardon towards the cronies of the old system.
And now you're also coming to one of my questions, which is we have those 3 investigation commissions appointed by the new parliament, and they're investigating the spy software on opposition politicians. They are investigating unlawful use of money and other things. And the point I would like to ask you is, it may be more a truth commission than it's an investigation commission, but is there at all any point in a truth commission if the state-owned television will not report about it? Because, I mean, you and I and a lot of people who voted for the opposition, they know it's a gang of bandits, but the people who voted for PiS, they also know they're saints. And I mean, you need to present it to those people who voted for PiS, and they're only watching the state television.
I think, of course, that this special investigation committees, parliamentary investigation committees, they have 2 functions. One function, for me, most important, is really to find out what the truth was and what really happened, and to punish the culprits. The other reason is, of course, the reason of publicity for the general public, to show it out what really had been happening, especially with the illegal tapping of the mobile devices, and this is
very close to the Watergate.
This is like that. Remember what happened still. One of the reasons for which Hillary Clinton lost the elections, it was the use of a private mail server.
Yes.
I mean, this government had been using private emails for their secret exchange of informations continuously. Nothing came out of it, apart from the fact that we know a little bit more what was going behind the scenes. But what I want to say is that I think it has to be done. No matter, I would not care about the public television, and I do hope that the moment the new government, come into power, they will find a way actually to reverse the situation in television.
legally or illegally?
Per fas et nefas. Yes, legally or legally. But I think it could be still done legally. There are ways. Public television is a company. There's a company applying to it.
You can start a bankrupt.
There are some other reason. I'm not an expert really, but I have a trust in expert lawyers. I mean, and lawyer is a person who is there to obey the law, but also to know how to use law to her aims in a legal way, though. So I think one day it'll happen. I mean, already now you've got this a wonderful phenomenon of people watching same at YouTube. This is it has become almost better than a talk show.
Absolutely. I mean, people watch other things than television today. And I also got in love with some of the interviews.
But I think it'll happen. Of course, you will not convince the hardliners because it's an article of faith. It's not an article of reason. But I think that these that are of that opinion are probably a quarter of the society. It's still a lot.
It's a lot, yes. I mean,
look what has just happened in the Netherlands. What has happened in Denmark sometimes with the election.
That's very
Unfortunately, our societies are like that. We are much more open to, and this is also this culture / misculture of information. We are much more open to information which we cannot select anymore, and populism just reaps its harvest.
Because I have an impression that this is more or less like the United States, that we have two different groups. They don't know what the other groups think. They don't. They fight each other if they meet. They think the others are mad.
There's no platform of compromise, and I think this is so. If I may come back to the comparison, the easy comparison, but completely fallible in comparison between '89 and 2023. Before '89, or in '89, we did not have to restore a constitutional system. We had to build a constitutional system. Whatever had been happening before was semi or legal or illegal, it didn't matter, but it happened within a different regime.
You could do whatever you wanted.
Yes. And therefore we needed a deal, and therefore you could say, okay, these guys, these girls, they didn't do the right thing, but we need a compromise because we need to build anew. What PiS did over the last 8 years, they violated the existing constitution. So you cannot compare these two situations. And the second situation, this thing about, the people to whom you can talk. I may be wrong, but I was pretty young back then in '89. But you've been living in Poland for a long time, so you must have heard this expression. You had this category of persons who you define as good commies.
Yes.
So people who did it because of they believe or because of pragmatical reasons, but they were clever people on the other side who actually knew how to go around, and the moment 88, 87 came, they were behind the change as well. People like Fischbach, for instance, in Gdańsk, or Rakowski.
I mean, after all, it was the state. I mean, people just wanted to survive and do. I mean, if you were a lawyer, you just wanted to be a lawyer.
So, and I think that's the other big difference nowadays. We don't have on the so-called other side, and I shred anytime I say the other side because I don't want to see my society being two-sided. But we don't have on the other side people with whom you can talk.
But now, let me come to one of my questions here, because you say the constitution has been violated, and I think you're right. But really the only one that can claim the constitution is violated is the Constitutional Tribunal.
Which doesn't exist.
Well, they sit there. It's been changed into a kind of parliament.
So the Constitutional Court, the situation is as follows. So within the Constitutional Court, we've got 15 seats. 5 of those seats are wrongfully occupied. 3 because they were the judges appointed to already legitimately elected judges who had not been sworn in by the president. 2 following judges are wrongfully chosen because they were too old. Mrs. Pawłowicz and Mr. Piotrowicz, they were over the age limit for a Supreme Court justice when they were elected, so they can't have been elected to the Constitutional Court. So 5 of those are gone. Soon a few of those will be going because their term will end within the next year. Some people, like among others Sadurski and Andrzej Zoll, an eminent constitutional lawyer, criminal lawyer, former ombudsperson, they say that it's a bit like a poisoned fruit. So these 5 justices poisoned the whole tribunal because they were sitting on the benches. So that's.
But 3 of them would anyway go in half a year's time.
Yeah. So I think the soft option is within a little moment we will have a majority of rightfully appointed justices and proper lawyers. That's the biggest problem. I don't want to have on the Constitutional Court my judge. I don't want to have a judge who is left or right wing. I want to have a lawyer, a judge. My wonderful friend, former Constitutional Justice Professor Hvilke, would always say, okay, we knew who was elected by whom. So they were the red judges and the black judges. He was one of the red judges, right? But the moment they went to the chambers, he says, it had disappeared because there were lawyers talking about a legal problem.
And after all, there are some lawyers. Some of them might change their position when there come a new government.
I mean, Pszczółkowski, for instance, the first constitutional justice chosen by PiS, he is now the only rightful one on the court. He always says, gives a separate judgment. He always he always speaks about the legality of the choice of the other justice.
Until then, what should we do? Because PiS had a fantastic solution to this. They just didn't publish the verdicts of the Constitutional Tribunal. Should we do the same?
I think this is, first of all, the first moment that will happen. Obviously, the Prime Minister Tusk will publish the judgments that had not been published yet. So one, for instance, is, if I'm not mistaken, about the Council of Judiciary. So this will happen. The second thing, it's a much easier situation. Beata Szydło did not publish the judgments. That's a constitutional edict. Donald Tusk will, if they are not wise enough, will not be facing the issue of not publishing judgments. He will be facing the issue of publishing non-judgments, because whenever there is a wrongfully appointed judge on the bench, it's not a judgment. It's like the antonym of judgment. So again.
But that's a very tough interpretation, isn't it?
No, I think it's a very easy. It's an interpretation that should be at the simplest task at the legal logic exam at the first year for law students.
Okay, right.
I mean, somebody who pretends to be a judge but is not a judge is not a judge, and whatever he or she says is not a judgment simply because he or she is not a judge. And if we take an example that probably your viewers may have heard of, the infamous abortion judgment that practically eliminated right to abort from...
Yes, we talk about it doesn't exist.
This judgment is not a judgment because there was a wrongfully appointed justice on the bench.
Yes.
So this is easy. There, for instance, the Minister of Health and Minister of Justice, they will issue statements in which they say they will give orders to their subordinates not to implement, because and the reason is a legal ground. It's not a machinery. It's not magic. It's not tough. It's simply not an act of law.
Let me go to another question, because when I talk to people, I hear many people who hate our Minister of Justice, Mr. Ziobro. Many want to see him behind bars, and I've actually said it's impossible because we won't get 60% to accuse him.
That's enough.
But I understand that it's possible to take him to an ordinary court.
Yeah. So in order you've got the Tribunal of State and some categories of possible culprits, like the ministers. There's a huge bar for the threshold for the president. For the ministers and the prime minister, it's 66% of the members of parliament. So it's
60, I think.
Or maybe 60.
Yeah.
But you can do, yes, you can go for the special parliamentary investigation committees, which have got all the powers of prosecution.
Yes.
So you have to go there, you have to testify, and if you don't, you are sanctioned on the basis of the penal code and code of penal procedure. To lift the immunity of a member of parliament, you only need 50%.
Yes, that would be possible. But what do you think about the other part of society? They will say this is revenge. It will just deepen the differences in the Polish society.
If my point is, so if we don't do it, will it ameliorate the situation? I don't think so. No. They will never take it as a grant of pardon. They will always take it as an act of weakness, or an act of, or actually a proof that everything had been correctly carried out. So I would be, again, it's a luxury of someone who does not have to implement what they think. It's a luxury of a law professor who only teaches law. But I would be very strict and rigid carrying out the procedures, because this is what the law is about. And you need to communicate. You need to communicate in easy language what you have done and what you have done and why you have done that. And I have some trust in a way. So I think this whole horror of 8 years of undermining of the rule of law has got a silver lining, and it's much more than just a lining. It's quite something. I would like to believe it's a solid base for the future. If you have in a country which traditionally does not vote 75% of the population going to the polling stations, this is amazing. This is amazing. My Irish friend, who is a journalist for the Irish Times in Berlin, we were talking on the electoral night, and he would say, we've been, now we should have a peep here, but he said, I quote, "We've been bitching about Poland so much, and look at it." I was so proud. I was so proud. I don't care whom they voted. Of course they voted mostly the opposition, but I don't care. What I care is that people really found out that it was an important act, and I may be too optimistic, but I have a strong hope it'll continue. So people are, notwithstanding public TV, notwithstanding the usual propaganda, notwithstanding the fire brigades cars given here and there, they actually saw it through, and they wanted to change. And above all, thanks to these 8 years, and I use the word thanks on purpose, many people in this country who had not heard about the courts, constitution, human rights, LGBT rights,
yes,
all of a sudden they know about it. They know how important these things are.
I absolutely agree with you on what you said here, but there's one thing I'm afraid about. That is, every government have talked about putting their predecessors to court. PiS have talked about putting Tusk behind bars for the past 8 years. They haven't done it. But there will come a new government sometime, and if we start putting former ministers behind bars, what will happen next?
I don't want to put former ministers behind bars. I want to carry out all the consequences of any possible wrongful acts of the people who had committed wrongful acts. So if the people happen to be ministers, it's in a democratic system, they are no better than anyone else, and they should respond for what they had done. So it's not why didn't they manage to put up Tusk behind the bars? For a very simple reason. There was no reason. They didn't have, because, you know.
Don't you think you can find some dirt on anyone in that position?
you can find dirt on anyone, but if they hadn't found any dirt, because at the end of the day, there's nothing. And they really tried hard, we know that. They had these trolling investigations, they put people into arrests for long months hoping to get any kind of information. And if they had come literally with nothing, that means either they didn't work hard enough, but they did. Okay. Or there was really not anything that would make a huge difference. And I'm not an idealist, I know politics is dirty, you do things and stuff and you compromise, but the mere fact that for 8 years they didn't even manage to have, I mean they have this former secretary of the city of Warsaw, now released because he became a European member of parliament.
Yes.
But I don't remember any more of this big scandals that would be shown. Yeah, they tried to.
You don't think it's because they were careful and just didn't want a situation where they themselves could face consequences?
I think they didn't. I think they are. Again, I don't want to sound any kind of superior to that, but especially as far as the public TV is concerned, I think they are not too smart. It's really this kind of. I still remember the communist propaganda.
Oh, it looked much more realistic, the communist propaganda.
Yeah,
I mean, today it looks like North Korea television.
And of course the times have changed, but I think whatever Urban used to do was way smarter.
Yes, absolutely. I agree.
I mean, we knew he was lying, but he, unfortunately he did it in a very smart way. Most of the things they do on public TV is so stupid, you can't imagine that people come out and you think, is it really on purpose, or don't they know any better? So but you know, they tried framing the former senator, now member of parliament, Krzysztof Brejza, with tapping his telephone. They didn't manage. Even with that, they didn't manage. They fabricated text messages from his telephone. Somebody leaked that to the public TV. They were shown. Krzysztof Brejza, notwithstanding, got re-elected just to the lower chamber of parliament. There's no investigation. I mean, they had been having an investigation against his father and him for years, but there weren't even charges pressed. And they were very easy on pressing charges in this country. And they loved the situation in which they could film an arrest of a prominent politician at 6 o'clock in the morning.
Okay, yes, of course, they would love that. I agree.
Brejza had immunity as a senator, but his father, as the president of Wrocław, he didn't. So they could have. They didn't.